Whether you're a gamer, a developer, investor, a parent with a credit card, or just maybe someone who's heard of microtransactions and you're curious, I'm here to tell you two definitions and a couple examples of microtransactions so you can make the best choice on whether or not you should hate microtransactions. So first, I'd like to start with a definition from a book. It's called The Book of Esports. It's by William the Professor Collis. This is what we're going to look at first, is the different types of monetization models in video gaming right now. And then we'll be able to define microtransactions and kind of see the evolution so far. So let's start. The models include Blades, the razor and blades revenue model, in which subsidized platforms, mostly consoles, capture market share to lock in long-term sales like games, game cartridges, box copies. So basically, a lot of console companies, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, they actually sell their hardware at a loss so that they can get their systems into the homes of their users, and then they can profit from game sales, subscriptions, as well as a couple other things once you're in their ecosystem. As we go into the future, this is what a lot of game developers are using now and choosing to do with their video games. They make the game free to play, and microtransactions are an evolution of the razor and blades revenue model, in which the games themselves become the sales platforms, generating revenue by selling incremental enhancements to their gameplay. Microtransactions were heavily popularized by the mobile industry and often involved giving away the game as a free download, a so-called freemium game. Specifically in mobile games, there is pay-to-win model, where a game is free to download, but you can pay a bunch of money, a boatload of money, and you win the game with your super overpowered abilities that you now have on credit card demand. Our last business model for video games that we'll talk about is the subscriptions business model. It's a magazine-style revenue model in which customers subscribe to a game by paying recurring fees, often charged annually in advance in return for regular access to evolving content. So for that, what comes to mind is World of Warcraft. Anyways, that is a general look at different monetization models. Now, why do we go over all these different aspects if we're just talking about microtransactions? Well, it's important to understand the evolution of how much these monetization models have just developed over the years. This idea of monetization in-game on a free-to-play game has only become popularized within the last couple years. I think the biggest one was Fortnite, is one that really kicked off and got into the mainstream. It's important to see that because once we get into this trend, we're going to continue to see this grow and grow until something new, something better, something that brings more money in comes about. But right now, microtransactions are the best way to bring in the most money per user. The next definition I would like to share from a developer's insight. So we got kind of the industry side. Now we're going to look at the developer side. This comes from the new AAA RTS real-time strategy developer, Frost Giant Studios. They're making a game called Stormgate. And right now they're still developing it. They're still creating the game, but they're really open with the community. So what I'm going to share with you, we're going to watch a video of a newsletter shared by Grubby and hear his thoughts on it real quick.
The game as a service approach. The game as a service model, which you've seen in games like League of Legends, is a common choice for modern game development. This typically means an initially smaller scope of content at launch, with more content released at regular intervals afterwards.
This is nice too.
The advantage of this approach is that additional content releases can be continually improved and adapted to player feedback. Regular updates also keep things fresh, giving old players a reason to keep coming back and new players a reason to get started.
Yeah, that's really good. We'll get some worse voice now. Let's go on.
With service-style releases, the smaller launch scope can enable a tighter focus for the development team, increasing the quality of the team's work. These factors have the added benefit of making a free-to-play model possible.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice system too. Personally, I quite like this. I've played games that are similar to this, where it's free to play, but then they sell you content as it's released, and you're never really suckered into buying anything you didn't intend. You like the content, therefore you buy it. and it's pretty good for both fans and content creators because there's like new story beats coming out, new like content drops. I like it.
So there we're able to appreciate a little bit more of kind of the inside opinions about games as a service from a developer viewpoint. So that's kind of the big thing of why games as a service is so huge right now, because you just have a small content, you put it out, everyone can have it, it's free, and the developers have a ton of extra time to work on awesome content and just release it as it's ready. And this comes in a form of being able to sell it as a battle pass or different microtransactions. So there we have kind of the inside scoop. So let's take a look now at a good example of microtransactions and a bad example. So the bad example that we're going to take a look at first is Battlefront 2. This one's been covered quite a bit over the course of gaming history. A lot of hype over the first one, but it wasn't really that good, barely had any content. So they made a second one with twice as much content, maybe 3 times as much more. A lot of new game modes, a lot of exciting things were in it. But players soon realized once they hopped into the game, having a good old time, that they could not play because it was stuck pretty much by a paywall, or they had to play hundreds of hours to collect all these heroes. So it was either pay to win right now, get all these cool perks, get the heroes. You pay a bunch of money and we will give them to you through a loot box system. You know, a lot of people learn from this. Basically, the point is that we're going to look at in this EA comment is this kind of behind the scenes from a community team manager. This is the most infamous comment on Reddit history. I think it's still one of the most disliked comments on Reddit. They said here, the intent is to provide players with a sense of pride and accomplishment for unlocking different heroes. So basically the main problem here is that still they weren't backing down. The problem was it was still locked behind a paywall because people that barely, you know, they have a long day at work, you know, they come back, they have a couple hours at the end of each day. It would take them maybe a few months, maybe years even. So that was the problem. It was either do that or pay a bunch of money. So this is one of the more gregarious looks that we have at microtransactions, just fully pay to win. So now let's take a look at a good example.
Fortnite.
Yeah, we mentioned it earlier. Not everyone's favorite game, but it was huge. It was a culture phenomenon. And we'll take a look at this article real quick, just look at it. Fortnite made more than $9 billion in revenue in its first 2 years. Now this is backed by financial reports, board presentation here that was linked, so it is accurate. Pretty insane. That's a lot of money. $9 billion in revenue in the first 2 years of its creation. So you can kind of see why a lot of people are moving to this games as a service model. Now, what does Fortnite use? Well, let's take a look. The Battle Pass. Now, in this Battle Pass, you play more after spending a certain amount of dollars in any game that has a Battle Pass. And the more you play, you acquire awesome items like, you know, Darth Vader. The next one is Fortnite Crew. This is kind of a subscription model in the game. It's not required. You just get a ton of perks, monthly V-Bucks, which is in their in-game currency. By pretty much they have a shop that updates weekly, daily, hourly, and you can spend V-Bucks on in-game items. So those are kind of the main 3 things that are super popular right now in a lot of different games, but Fortnite was really the one that made it so popular. That's kind of the key there. We looked at a good example and we had our bad example. We have our definitions that we took a look at from industry insider, business leaders, as well as a developer insider. So now you, the gamer, you, the parent with the credit card, you, the person that clicked on this video because you're like, oh, what's a microtransaction? I've heard of these things before. Now you have just a couple tools to make your own decision. I was just trying to be informative in this video and reach out to people to kind of help them understand all these different nuances of the gaming and esports industry. So thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.